You listen to Live with Renk, and I appreciate that very, very much. Now, on air with us is Governor Rick Snyder, and I wanted to say good morning to you, and I very, very much appreciate you taking time out of your extremely busy day, Governor, to come speak with me and my listeners. I know we only have about 10 minutes, so I want to get to what is the biggest issue I hear from all my listeners about Prop 1, including myself, that I have in this, because we all know, as you do, politics is local. So depending on where you drive, you may think, oh yeah, we really need it, we may not. But putting that aside, what seems to be the biggest issue with this proposal by many out there, including myself, is how did a $1.2 billion problem become a $1.85 billion to $2 billion issue? And I know the answer to that is the additional $300 million to schools, about $100 million to local governments, and $260 million in the earned income tax credit. Your thoughts, Governor Snyder?
Sure, and I appreciate the question because, again, that's why I'm always happy to talk with you because it gives a chance to give some background on some of these issues. If it's okay, I'll actually give you a little bit longer piece of the description because I think it's helpful to put it in context of why we got more into issues with schools and everything else also. Because it really goes back to one of the things we're trying to accomplish out of this is actually simplifying our current system. Because right now when people go to pay at the pump, and they believe they're having all those resources, those state taxes go to transportation, a good chunk of what you pay at the pump does not go to transportation. The way it works in Michigan today is there's a flat 19 cents a gallon that goes to the transportation fund. The balance of state taxes on your gasoline is the retail sales tax, the 6% retail sales tax. And again, many people aren't even aware of that fact. So the issue is we wanted to increase essentially what we pay at the pump for transportation. And if we simply added more transportation tax to our gasoline and left the retail sales tax on, our gas prices would be relatively uncompetitive. We'd end up probably in about the taxes amounting to 60 cents or more a gallon. So part of this was to say, okay, if we want to do this right and we want everything at the pump to go to transportation, we have to remove the retail sales tax from our fuels. And when you do that, you actually create a big budget problem for our schools, local government, because that's where most of the retail sales tax goes. So this proposal, what it'll do is have 100% of everything at the pump go to transportation. And then to solve the problem that otherwise would be created with schools and local government that weren't even part of this, but to solve that problem is the most straightforward answer was to raise the retail sales tax from 6 to 7%. And again, this was a compromise where it was a bipartisan solution of both the House and the Senate. I supported it because, again, this was what we could work out where we could get a two-thirds vote of the legislature to do this in a smart fashion. And so by going to 6 to 7, it solves that hole we would otherwise create for schools and local government and, in fact, gives them some additional resources. Now, if you walk through the pieces of those additional resources, there's good purposes, and they can make sense in terms of if you look at the longer-term plan for the state. There's about $100 million going to revenue sharing for local government. That essentially would restore cuts we needed to make back in 2011. We were roughly about $70 million lower for local government than what we were before because of those cuts dealing with the big budget deficit. This would essentially make our local governments whole in that capacity. It would also restore the earned income tax credit, which was a benefit to lower-income working people that also was affected in 2011. It would take it back to what it was prior to 2011. The net new money really is the $300 million to the school aid fund. But the school aid fund dollars would also help K-12, but it would also help our community colleges in an area where I think we need to invest more is really career tech education and the skilled trades. And when you talk about where we need to invest in our state, I get widespread approval from almost everyone on the political spectrum that skilled trades is an area that's a smart investment for Michigan's future. So if you look at it, again, would I have done things different way? In a perfect world, I suggested different answers. But this was a good compromise where we were able to get two-thirds support in a bipartisan fashion. And in the long-term sense, most of the money does go to transportation. We've simplified it at the pump. And we have some additional resources to either restore things we previously had to cut or to put in place things that are important for tens of thousands of Michiganders to get great, well-paying jobs in the skilled trades.
So the the 6% that is not being charged in the sales tax for gas, I understand reduces money to school funding because a lot of that money went to school funding. So is that 300 million to schools almost a zero sum gain then at that
No, they
point?
actually get some they get some additional dollars, but that's why I wanted to walk you through the thing about
Okay.
career tech education and the skilled trades, because this is something that we're probably not investing in the right amount, and that would help Michigan's economy a lot. Because if you talk to employers out there, actually they're really looking for people with the right training, and we can do a better job of that. And that's something that we should be investing in, because these are great, well-paying jobs to be a welder, electrician, important jobs like that.
All right, real quickly, I know we only have a few minutes. Some questions that came up from some of my listeners. Wasn't there a sunset provision put in this? Because what happens to the 1.2 billion in road, at least in 10 years, where we said we'll need to increase the spending for 1.2 billion for 10 years? What happens year 11 with that 1.2 billion?
It needs to keep going. This is an ongoing requirement. And to give you a benchmark on how, if you look at it or you want to compare it, I get the analogy a lot when people go, particularly to Ohio. You get stories from people saying they can tell when you cross the state line when you go from Ohio to Michigan. Ohio spends about $1 billion more on roads than we do. So the issue is we've been underinvesting on an annual basis by at least $1 billion or more. So this $1.2 billion really goes forward in the future to make sure we keep our roads not just for 10 years but for longer, and get them in the good to fair category instead of having roads good to the poor category, which is awful. I mean, when you hit one of those potholes, it is not a good experience.
No, I understand it. And as I said, the biggest pushback I hear is this added. For instance, why wasn't this a single issue bill that I'm a big fan of, being just the $1.2 billion that's needed? Now I understand when it gets into the making of policy, things change, and you gave us your thoughts on why that is. The other big question people are asking me is the vehicle registration fee. Were you able to walk us through that? He said, I got an email. Could he explain in detail how this part of the proposal works and what the typical fee might be?
Sure. Let me give you an illustration. And the way it would work on vehicle registrations is currently in Michigan, the way it works is when you buy a new vehicle, you pay a vehicle registration. And just giving you an illustration, I'm just picking a vehicle, and I'm rounding numbers here, but roughly if someone bought a $30,000 vehicle, and I picked that because the numbers round out better, is you'd pay about $150, I believe, in registration fees. And the way it works in Michigan is for the next 3 years, you would see a step down in that by, $15-$20 a year.
If Proposal 1 passes.
Well, what would happen is that's the way it currently works. Is there's a step down for about 3
Okay.
years after you get a vehicle.
Right.
And what this would do is it would grandfather in old vehicles, but for newer vehicles, well, it starts phasing in. So it gets phased in over time. So what happens for people that are in the step down phase, or if you bought a new vehicle, it wouldn't ramp down over that 3-year period. It would just stay at that $150.
Okay, so that's how the increase would in the vehicle fee registration would occur for the first 3 years,
Yeah,
and
so you
going
don't pay
forward.
more than what you pay today on that year one. You just don't get the step down.
I understand. Any other last? I only have a minute. Any other last thoughts you want to give my listeners on Prop 1 and your support of it?
Sure, and I'm a strong supporter. And as you said, Frank, if you look at it, I proposed different ways that didn't include any of these elements, but that's part of the political process. If you want to solve a problem and you want to show broad support, and again, this took a 2/3 vote of the legislature, very bipartisan. We've got over 100 and some groups supporting this. This is a balancing act to say we need safer roads in Michigan, and this does it. At the same time, we're looking at making additional investments in 2 or 3 other areas, but these are smart investments that fit a long-term scheme of success so we can put more Michiganders to work.
Thank you, Governor, for calling in today. I appreciate that very much.